So
Nice to
Alex
see
is running the
everyone.
business now.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I'm
you.
gonna call
Thanks
the
for
meeting to
asking.
order. And first up, we have our consent agenda. We have previous minutes from the August 7th meeting, and we have no policy reads tonight. Any discussion, concerns, questions about those prior minutes? So I'll make a motion then to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Kat?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Any need to switch up the flow?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Looks like we don't have any visitors tonight, and no one in the virtual world, eh?
No.
Okay, so moving on then, that brings us to our school spotlight with Gavin.
Perfect, thank you.
Give it a second,
This is my presentation, I worked very hard on it.
About the deep void.
The deep blackness, that is the start of the school year. So anyhow, I want to talk a little bit about our continual improvement for our school spotlight. If you move to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about the why. So every year, of course, we develop a school-wide plan in accordance with federal funding as well, to focus on specific goals for improving the school and the community. And so the biggest thing we did, and these numbers will probably seem very familiar because I've shared them before, is by the end of the year, we saw with behavior we had 1,872 planning room referrals. And keep in mind, most of those would have been referrals that had escalated from disruption in the classroom, multiple interventions, multiple attempts, and yet they still ended up afterwards into the planning room, consisting of a loss of instructional time for those students and also loss of instruction in the classroom due to addressing disruptive behaviors. 264 admin level referrals, so these were referrals that actually bypassed the planning room and went straight to me to be addressed. 156 days of ISS. A lot of those were half days, but still, that's once again a fairly significant number to have. And then 22 days of out of school suspension. So we know when we look at those numbers, something's not working. We need to better meet the needs of the students. Academics, majority of the students are not at grade level for either literacy or math, as indicated by our VT CAP scores and our STAR scores. So we know once again, academically, there's still room for growth. And those numbers were roughly about a third of students at grade level, so definitely some major areas of growth. So what we saw was there was a need. In order for Berkshire to meet the needs of its students, we identified as a team 3 key goals. We will increase the number of students performing at or above grade level in literacy by 50%. We want to take that number, we want to double it. We want to do the same thing with mathematics. And then a big part of this, I think, is once again, how we address behaviors. And in the post-COVID world, it has been more challenging. We wanted to decrease the number of planning room referrals by 33%, the number of administrative referrals by 50%. Just, I'll talk a little bit about so far how we're doing at the very end of it, but next slide. So what we ended up doing, and I apologize for the visuals, this is actually from a spreadsheet that I had developed over, and administrators love spreadsheets. Once you become an administrator, it's like, let's turn this into a spreadsheet. When we were developing these goals, we started to look at what we needed to do next in order to affect positive change. So we first lined up the school board goals. We then looked at how our school goals, our school-wide improvement plan goals, could sync up with the school board goals. Then from there, we looked at what were our domains. And by that I mean sort of what are our big levers, what are those processes that we can control to affect this change? And the 3 that we came to, and I know I'll be talking a lot about this all year, but they're important, are behavior management or behavior support, professional learning communities, and MTSS. Those were our 3 big levers. And so we identified, based on the board goals and the school goals, what domain would help us be a good lever point or leverage point for affecting that positive change. From there, we moved into looking at our SIT teams for this year. What SIT teams could help shepherd those levers? What SIT teams could help guide this work? And then we worked on SIT team charges, leaders, and then official charges. Next slide. So, now moving into the how. Lever 1, behavior. We've already started a lot of this work. A lot of this work was spent this past summer, really setting up the school for success. But with behavior, the first step, implementing developmental designs, which is an approach or a framework towards approaching discipline. It's particularly specialized at the middle school level, but can translate to all levels. Responsive classroom and developmental designs are two programs that are very closely related, and so there's a lot of interplay. Typically, responsive classroom has happened at the elementary levels, developmental designs has happened at the middle school levels. My assistant principal and I, as well as our instructional coach, and one of our new middle school teachers who's been a leader among the group, all went through developmental designs PD this past summer. We rolled out social contracts. We adopted, instead of a linear approach to discipline of, hey, I asked you to pay attention, Terry Sue, that's your warning. Oh, you talked again? Now you need to go to the take a break spot. Oh, that's the third time you talked? Now you need to go to the buddy room. Okay, now you're going to the planning room. I apologize for calling you out, Terry Sue. She was actually being perfectly well behaved. So then, instead of that sort of linear approach, we adopted in our student handbooks and our faculty handbooks a more toolkit approach of, okay, you know what? Let's look at the behavior and choose the intervention based on what that behavior is communicating to us. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be escalating consequences, because obviously you can't continually just warn someone necessarily, but it's more about looking at what would be the right solution, because maybe that solution isn't, you know what, maybe Terry Sue doesn't need to take a break. Maybe she just needs her seat changed. Maybe she needs a hallway check-in. Maybe she just needs me to sit down and just speak with her very briefly and get her back on track. The other thing, and this is more nuanced, so I want to be perfectly honest, we're still working on this as a team, but the other, the big metaphor we have used is, instead of being a cop with a radar gun, looking for the infraction and immediately assigning a consequence for the infraction, we want to take more of a doctor's approach of, let's look at the behavior and see what we can do as educators to help support those students. We revised our student and faculty handbooks to include level behaviors, where a lot of behaviors that were being escalated to the planning room didn't necessarily need to be escalated to the planning room. The biggest distinction, and I know I spoke about this at the last meeting, was this idea of, is it disruptive defiance or is it non-disruptive defiance? Because if I'm in class and I'm refusing to work and I'm just putting my head down, is sending me to the planning room necessarily going to address that problem, or is there something else, a different conversation we need to have? And more likely that conversation is probably academic based and probably needs to be addressed through our MTSS process. And making sure that we have common routines. That was probably the biggest thing, is going back and saying, you know what, we've been using a student handbook that really has not been deeply looked at for a long time. A lot of change had happened since a lot of those policies and routines have been established. Let's go ahead and go back and look at what we actually really expect and what kinds of routines or expectations were kind of just hanging there just for posterity's sake, and maybe it's time for us to update or move on. Increasing engagement and rigor. If the old adage, an idle mind is the devil's playground, is real. And so being able to make sure that we're increasing our rigor, increasing our engagement, giving students the opportunity to learn and grow and meaningfully participate was important as well. And then finally, strengthening MTSS for behavior, including our updated behavior matrix, updating the purpose of our BST meetings, and providing targeted SEL intervention at level 3 MTSS. If you go to the next slide, I have a couple of artifacts I can share with you. This is an example of what our leveled behaviors looks like in our faculty and student handbooks. So we put a lot of great pains towards saying, this is where we're gonna handle it in class, this is where we might have to escalate it to the planning room, this is the stuff that needs to go directly to Mr. Roddy or to Ms. Paquette, our assistant principal. You'll look at our, this is an example of our administrative behavior matrix. Instead of having it be very rigid with an automatic this or automatic that, we actually added minimums and maximums to allow us some leeway to see, okay, based on the infraction, based on the context, we could go minimum with a consequence, or we could go up to a maximum of consequence. More important than that, however, I think is this column that, or this row we added here, which is MTSF's level. So we now have it so that if we have students who are having behaviors that are chronic in terms of something that's at the admin level, even our planning room matrix has a component of this. If we see someone who's engaging in physical aggression more than twice, we should probably be looking at putting that student at level 3 MTSS. They probably need something in addition to just a consequence. They need that additional support. Next slide. Oh, that scared me for a second. Here's the example of our planning room matrix that we've updated. And then here's our MTSS framework, which is our continuum of behavior. So this is what MTSS for behavior concerns looks like. And it's just like academics. There are intervention meetings held every week. There are caseloads where students are going to receive level 3 targeted SEL intervention. And then there's going to be a pathway for when students are receiving that universal or that double dosing support, if it's moving into intervention, and if that intervention isn't working, then moving it into potential EST, or looking at those greater supports. Next slide. Lever 2 is MTSS. Academic intervention meetings, just like we have SEL intervention meetings every week, academic intervention meetings every week. Making sure that we have win time scheduled and that we have the supports necessary for both intervention and enrichment. Providing or developing an enrichment menu for teachers. And what that means is, one of the things that we have fought against is this idea of, okay, I'm coming in for enrichment if I'm a teacher who maybe doesn't normally teach literacy, but I'm still helping with enrichment, or if I'm a paraeducator working at this level. Sometimes there was a stress with the teacher saying, okay, I need to generate all of these different activities. And sometimes there was a stress for the teachers involved as well. I feel like I'm kind of having to generate activities on the spot. We actually have developed menus from basically in collaboration between the core subject teachers and interventionists and enrichment teachers, so that there's always a menu that they can pull from. If the teacher says, you know what, this group for enrichment, I actually have something for them to do, excellent. But if it's like, you know what, they reached this level, so why don't you pull one of these activities from the enrichment menu? It's something that we've already vetted, it's something that we know is going to target an area of growth, and then you can help facilitate that. In addition to that, small groups for for push and support, and then EST meeting protocols as well. And if you go to the next slide, here are some artifacts. Here's our continuum of instruction for MTSS. So that would be our academic MTSS levels. So once again, universal instruction, double dosing, targeted intervention, intensive intervention, or an EST plan, and then special education and alternative placement. This is also an EST meeting protocol that we developed as well, so that we can make sure that we're guiding our EST meetings with a sense of purpose as well. Next slide. The lever 3, PLCs. We've scheduled PLC time. We are now approaching, anytime we have our STAR testing, which is our benchmark testing, we're actually narrowing it so that we as a school are going to do it within 1 week, so that we can make sure that we have more consistent data. And also when we meet up in our PLCs after that, we can actually have designated data dive days. And a lot of that was actually already developed from our curriculum and instruction team at the SU level that we were able to pull in to implement. We've revamped our PLC agendas. And this is a big one. We made sure that PLCs, when we could, we would offer multiple co-leads of the PLC. So once again, the burden isn't always necessarily falling on one person, but can be shared. Next slide. And so here's our generic PLC agenda. And then this is just a sample of our week 1 calendar. We do a bi-weekly PD calendar where we schedule times where there's PLC, academic intervention, SEL intervention, in either staff meeting time or EST time. Next slide. Finally, the fourth lever is our sit teams. And so last year at the end of the year, I sent out a survey with the staff saying, based on our sit teams, last year we had 5 sit teams. We were focusing on these domains. Some of those teams kind of had reached a natural end, where the work still lives on, but it doesn't need to live as a sit team. And so I surveyed the staff to get their input of what do you think we need to focus more on. And so the feedback came back, and so we ended up with student culture, which focuses on campus culture from the student perspective, staff and community engagement. So that's not just staff morale, that's also finding ways to reach out to the community and bring them into the school. One very poignant thing that was said to me actually when I was first interviewing for the role of principal at Berkshire was that there was a time when Berkshire was the center of the community. And I said then and there, we've got to bring that back. Hopefully this can help do some of that. An academic achievement team, and then an SEL team. Now all of those SIT teams are being overseen by our CIT team, or Continual Improvement Team, and I did steal this moniker from Beth O'Brien at Richford, because she and I were talking about leadership, and she said, you know what, Gavin, I don't do a leadership committee, because if we have a leadership team per se, that almost communicates to everyone else, you're not, like we're the decision makers and you're not. And so I realized, you know what, I think it's time for us to sort of revamp that as well. So we transitioned away from leadership to the Continual Improvement Team, and to be on that team, you have to agree to lead, or at least co-lead a SIT team, and lead or co-lead a PLC. And then of course, the final part is also to consult, to help bring up, hey, you know what? These are some of the issues that have been raised, or these are some of the things that we've seen, or this is an idea that some have discussed. Let's discuss it and see if we can propose it to the staff. Next slide. And so the artifact here, this is all part of this magnificent spreadsheet that I'm so proud of. And that once again, principal talk, whenever you're proud of gushing over a spreadsheet. These are the members of our CIT team, and so we based it off of SIT team and then PLC facilitators, and so we were able to assign people to specific spots. And then we also, as a group, developed a continual improvement team vision and a continual improvement team mission. The vision is that will serve as a steering committee for the school where educators gather to review current operations of the school with particular emphasis on its ability to meet its goals and collaborate on developing solutions to allow the school to better uphold its vision and mission. And then the mission is that we will consult with school leadership on the current operations and success of the school, oversee teams designed for increasing educational output and student success, and help problem solve current issues affecting school effectiveness and student performance. If you move to the next. So before I take questions, I did allude to some data. Unfortunately, I don't have as much academic data because we're still within our second week, but 5 days of school. Last year, we had 38 planning room referrals within 5 days. This year, we're down to 14. So we're seeing a decrease. That is not to say I don't want to misrepresent and say it's all sunshine and roses, because, well, the other thing is we're working better to contain the classroom, some of the behaviors in the classroom, but there still are behaviors, and they're real, and we're going to continue to work on it. And we're going to work with students as well, because change is hard, but change is also important, and in this case, it's necessary. So if I have any allotted time, I can field questions.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. When last year, you had already identified, partway through last year, you had identified these things, and to watch the evolution of where you came to that acknowledgement that these were like the big ideas that we need for continuous improvement, to where you are right now, and the work that went in this summer in order to be able to articulate all of that, I'm sure to roll out to your staff and to your students and your family is very impressive. I was just taking some notes, and it made my superintendent heart happy, because I could see that you took that thinking and that theory and you turned it into action. So I'm excited for where you're heading and look forward to seeing those results, Gavin.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I have a quick question. The number 1,872 and the acronym ODRS, what does the acronym stand for?
Those would be office discipline referrals. Really what it is those are referrals to the planning room.
more a comment than a question, but I mean, just to kind of piggyback on what Lynn said, it's really, it's quite impressive and this kind of strategic approach here that is really kind of getting more to the heart of the matter, like that idea of the doctor versus as opposed to the police person and kind of like looking at what like root causes are going on and how to better support students instead of immediately going toward that discipline approach, or if there is a discipline need, that it's kind of better understood and kind of reflects kind of where that student is at and what he or she or they need in the moment. So it's just a very progressive, thoughtful way to look at these really complex, like you said, there's a lot of nuance here, and but I'm really excited to see kind of the arc of this new approach over the year and where things land at the end of the year.
I think one of the things is, it is nuanced, and so there is a little bit, it's easy to sort of have that 3 strikes you're out, because it doesn't involve a lot of thinking in the moment. Okay, didn't like that, didn't like this, you're out. But it wasn't solving the problem, and so it's gonna take a lot of work. I already know for a fact that we're gonna have to spend some time going back and reviewing those level discipline behaviors. We're also gonna have to go back and practice once again utilizing that sort of toolbox or that doctor's mindset, because it is nuanced and sometimes, and it does involve some degree of judgment. And so that's just gonna be work that we're gonna have to grow together. And I think over time, just through continual feedback and continual support of one another and collaboration, we can sort of begin to really shape that culture. But it is gonna take time, because there are gonna be times where one teacher might not address things the same way another would. And of course, we wanna give the students consistency, but we are working with humans, and also behaviors are very different than they were even when I started education. And so we have to sort of be more responsive and be willing to step outside of our comfort zone in order to really get at the end goal, which is student success.
Appreciate that you're looking at root cause too. So you're not saying there's no consequence, and you're not saying that there's no teaching. You're saying it's important that there are both pieces, and so you're trying to look for those patterns and then unpack what's there and what you need to build upon in order for those kids to develop the skills to be successful.
Exactly, and consequences can look different, and I think that was one of the biggest things. Is last year we were kind of just relying on the planning room as being the consequence, but the planning room isn't necessarily meant to do all of that, because it's really meant to work with students who are dysregulated so that they can be regulated. And for some students, sending students to the planning room when it's not appropriate isn't gonna affect the change. And in some ways it was reinforcing, because it was like, cool, if I don't want to be in this class, I now know exactly what I can do to get out.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Gavin.
it's excellent, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good work.
And before we move on, I was remiss in not introducing Zach and letting everyone introduce themselves to our new board member from Bakersfield. Welcome, Zachary.
Thank you.
And I thought it might be nice, because I don't think you know everyone in the room, eh? So maybe Courtney, if you want to start, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves.
I'm Courtney Fletcher, but you're emailed.
Yes, for sure.
I'm Morgan Daybell, business manager.
Bakerfield principal, I stand
Yeah.
up in the morning.
Yeah.
Teresa Hitchcock, Sheldon Principal.
Gavin Roddy, Berkshire principal.
Sandy Alexander, Montgomery Principal, we met outside.
Yes.
Lisa Hango, board member from Berkshire.
Mary Niles from Montgomery.
Lynn Coda, Superintendent.
Heather Moore, Leads Director.
Miranda Johnson, Sheldon board member.
John Jejix, Berkshire School Board member.
Nice. Awesome. Nice to meet you all.
And we've got
Two.
Kat on Zoom.
Hey, I'm Pat Barnard from Montgomery, a board member.
Nice to meet you, Kat.
Well, welcome.
you.
Apologies for that oversight. And I was realizing that as Gavin was giving his excellent presentation, there's probably so many acronyms and things that maybe for you
Yeah.
are kind of
Yeah.
new, so we can, maybe all of us, remember to kind of elaborate on what some of those acronyms are, and you'll get the lingo
For sure.
pretty soon. And do you have anything that you'd like to say?
I mean, what would you like to know about me? Professional. I'm a IT professional by trade. I work in a bank or a credit union. They'd hate that I called them a bank. I work from home, so I feel a little underdressed compared to most of you.
All good.
Oh, no.
It's,
I-
everything goes.
I have 2 kids in the school system in Bakersfield right now, and I have 1 on the way. So
Congratulations.
thank you.
Well, great. We're glad to have you.
Can you tell us how to spell your last name?
DORMAN.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All
Would you
right.
like to go by Zach or Zach?
Zach.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, great. So now up next, Morgan, our financial update.
So I have some acronyms for you. It's a pretty light agenda for me. Only one action item. The Vermont School Board Insurance Trust holds its annual meeting Friday, October 25th. It's the same day that the Vermont Education Health Initiative holds their annual meeting. Both are programs that are sort of cooperatives in the state of Vermont. School Board Insurance Trust, or VISBIT, is how we get most of our property insurance, liability insurance, things like that. And then the Vermont Education Health Initiative is a joint effort between the School Boards Association and the NEA, Vermont, the teachers union. And that's who manages the health care plan that all educators in the state are under. They both have annual meetings in October. They are at the same time as the conference for the Superintendent's Association, the School Boards Association. For the VISBIT meeting, as far as I know, there's no real action items that they're going to be taking up. And we do have the proxies for those meetings now. So in the past, the board has made one of 2 motions. One would be to appoint the VISBIT board as the proxy for casting any votes at that meeting. The second would be to nominate somebody who's going to be at that meeting to do it. I did it last year, Mary, you did one, and I did one last year.
Yeah.
Lynn and I will both be at that meeting. I don't know if you know
I
yet.
will
if
be
you'll
there.
down
Yeah.
So if past performance is any indication, you could pick one of those 3 people. And if you're interested in doing that, I'll read you the motion and read on points. I will be bringing a similar motion for the Health Initiative board meeting next month. I've not received the packet yet, so I don't know if there's anything on their agenda yet. So I don't want to lead you astray if there's something that's actually interesting that's going to happen there, which is highly unlikely. Who never knows.
And these are the ones that are at the lovely early hour of 7 in the morning. Is that correct?
I think it's like maybe 8, 7.
Okay.
Yeah, one's at 8 and one's at 8:15.
Okay. I'm happy to do it. It's fine. I will go. I need to talk to Doreen about registering.
Yeah. I can make a note of that.
Okay.
So if the board's so willing, it would be a motion to appoint Mary Niles as authorized representative to appear and vote on behalf of the board at any and all meetings of the members of the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust or any adjournment thereof.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll do that. Is there another one, Morgan, or just that one?
No, because we don't have the packet yet for
Okay.
that, so I'll bring that to you next month.
Okay, so we'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda, Lisa,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
And I'll probably be jumping in on some of Lynn's agenda items, but other than that, I don't have anything for you this month.
Okay, great. Thanks, Morgan.
I just made a note to Doreen, she'll reach out to you to get registered. Okay. So we have a slideshow.
We do have a session.
So we have some personnel this month. So in Bakersfield, the following are for action. And we may have done, did we do Clarice last time? Because
I don't
I feel like it might have been that.
No, because she wasn't happy.
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
So Clarice Talley, PE and health teacher for Bakersfield. Stephen Grant, middle school math interventionist for Sheldon. So I'd ask the board to make a motion to approve both of those hires.
Make that motion.
Thank you, Lisa. I roll Kat,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda, Lisa,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
We have a resignation, a little bit strange. We had someone who had accepted a contract and then decided not to take the position, so it's not really an action, so I wouldn't even kind of say that one out loud. We do still have some remaining open positions that I would just like to note. We have a preschool paraeducator position at Bakersfield. We have paraeducator position at Berkshire, halftime health, and still school nurse, Gavin, for
Yeah,
Berkshire.
we're still looking. We have a long-term sub for now.
Okay.
There's, I've heard of someone who's potentially interested, however, they haven't applied yet.
Okay. Montgomery is fully staffed, and Sheldon is looking for a paraeducator and a health teacher. I miss anything, principals?
We're interviewing a health person next week.
Oh, good,
For
fantastic.
the 35+5.
Fantastic. I don't have anything under student today. What's that? Except some opening day pictures from some of our NMV schools. It's always fun when Courtney puts those in our slideshow. Thank you, Courtney. I have asked Heather Moore to join us. Heather is our director for all of our 21st century after school programs. And we are very privileged here in Franklin Northeast to be the recipient of the 21C grant. And I think that we have had this grant and we have built these programs over such a period of time that I think that people may forget that there are a lot of schools that don't have any of these programs. So these programs, some schools don't have after school programs at all, and they don't have anything like this for summer. So it is really phenomenal that our kids have these opportunities. And other than the reptile piece that Heather's going to share, it was all fabulous stuff this summer.
Reptiles were fabulous too.
Yeah, I know they were fabulous for most people. But it just really good stuff happening in our LEAPS programs. And what I asked Heather to do is to also focus not only on the content of what the students learned. Like, this is not, I think sometimes people think about after school programming and summer programming as I'm reluctant to even use the term, but more of like a babysitting or like a, kids play. And there is play involved, absolutely. Kids have a lot of fun, and there's a ton of learning that happens in these programs, and the opportunities really stretch our kids' thinking and the work that they do with one another. And I think that Heather's going to do a great job describing that. And I also asked her to take a look just at like staffing levels in our programs and change over time of staffing and participation, so that as we're moving, I'm going to do that for a lot of things as we go through this year, because we're heading into another budget season and we're always needing to be mindful of what is our data telling us about our program. So I'm going to pass it on to you.
Great, thanks. Do I need to stand like Gavin did, or?
I think as long as you use a loud voice, the fan is a
Okay.
little, can everybody hear? Okay.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, just for like a build off what Lynn said about the 21C programs statewide. So 21C community learning centers, it's federally funded programming that Vermont has been very forward thinking in allowing schools to reapply for these funds, and it's a 5-year cycle. Many of you know that we were up for renewal last year, but because of the quality of our programs, we actually were given a continuation application rather than a reapplication, because our programs were at such a high standing. So that was really exciting. And in terms of like the statewide, about 20,000 kids across the state are looking for services like this. And so that's something, again, we have in our community and we've had for 21 years now. So it's really wonderful, and very proud of the work that our students and our staff and our community members have put into the programs. So here's kind of, sorry, I was just gonna, so I try to get a little bit of a variety, like we took a lot of great pictures, you know, but farming, top right, they're at Get Air at one of the programs. There's a student learning about flight maps, and 802 reptiles, and VINs came to do presentations. We had, what's that? Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences, thank you. Yep. And we took kids on hiking adventures and learned about the game warden and how they use their dogs. And so we played board games. There's a picture of Bakersfield students who are making the facade of, not the Brown Way. Brigham, thank you, Brigham. They used a picture and they worked together over a couple of hours to make the facade. It was really, really fun to watch them through that process. Now we can. So how we build the programs, elementary programs are a little different from the middle high school programs. So we work together, all 8 sites, in a shared planning tool so that we can learn from each other and develop some shared resources. Each week the elementary schools come up with themes, and so we plan our learning around some of those individual themes, and we always have a combination of there is free play time. It's really important to give students that downtime and that break. There's science learning, there's literacy learning, there's art, there's cooking, which is literacy and art, and SEL is all built into that. So we do all of our different activities based around those themes generally, because it helps enhance the learning. It helps reinforce what they've learned on Monday. A lot of our activities that the students had when we had special guests were related to the theme of the week. You can see the list of our special guests. We had fewer field trips this year than previous year. We got rained out and smoked out on a lot of field trips the summer before, so we decided to maybe bring some of the adventures to us. So we had more special guests. Next one. This is a sample plan of what a rotation might look like in a school. So one of the themes at Berkshire was disgusting discoveries, also known as grossology, depending on, you might be familiar with that term. So the students learned about how the heart pumps, the science behind that. Bean Boozled is a board game. I don't fully understand the mechanics of that one. So different like things that are like down and dirty and bodily functions. So it was really kind of fun and gross and giggly. The kids loved it. And we had grossology STEM kits too that the students were able to use and explore that we got from a grant last year. So that was exciting. And trying to read everything. Earwax snacks. So sometimes they made things that looked like a Halloween party. It was a pretty cool week. So I'll like kind of a really good example of the way that they rotated the activities for different learning styles, for different interests based around the theme. Last year we were able to use some grant funds to buy 12 bikes of different sizes for this school, and we have a couple of fleets along different a few of our schools now. So that was really great. So the students were able to do some biking around Berkshire every Thursday. Next slide. Again, this is a little hard, but at the middle school, we function a little differently. This is an example of one of their science activities where we had a science teacher. Every Wednesday they would do science projects. They would have the objective explained to them. They would go through vocabulary that they would be needing to do the experiments, the materials, safety precautions, and what's not listed there is the procedures. So they were able to do science experiments every Thursday, and sometimes a little bit more depending on the theme of their week at that site. All students rotate through those different kinds of activities, so every student's exposed to it. Something that we tried a little differently at the middle high school was, on top of our normal rotational programming, was we had mini camps, so students could pre-sign up for specific camps, they changed each week, and so they would spend the first 3 to 4 hours of the camp day learning about that specific activity. And some of them were like academic based, some of them were life experience based. So like the first one, hiking, I had the great pleasure of hiking with the kids one of the day, like one of the best days on the job. Students just summiting the mountains, seeing that view, saying I've never hiked before ever in my life, and I really want to do this again. Mountain biking, again, we were able to purchase mountain bikes. I think 4 of our schools right now currently have fleets of different types of bikes. So we brought the students to different trails, and they were able to learn about different areas in our like northern Vermont. We had 4-H come, and we did some stream science. I don't necessarily need to go through the whole list, but it gave the students an opportunity to spend about 12 hours really getting into an activity and taking their learning with it a little further. The last week of camp, we had a Richford camp and Enosburg camp come together to have a bake-off challenge. It's the first time we ever did it. It was marvelous. It was students from all of our 6 communities. So I think students from every community was part of it. And they spent the first couple of days learning a recipe, how to decorate their cupcakes, and then we put them in the kitchen under pressure. They had 2 hours, bake cupcakes, cool them in the freezer, and decorate them. And then we had some judges come in, do a judging. There was a criteria. Yeah, maybe next year we're gonna do it again. It was so much fun. So they learned a lot of different skills with that, and one kid actually called their grandparent for their family recipe for one of their cupcakes. Yeah, it was just, they had such a great time. And what you're seeing in the other picture is we partnered with Habitat for Aviation this summer, and we brought some students at the middle high school level over to the Franklin County Airport. They learned about aviation science, they learned about aviation careers, and they made bracelets and keychains and some fun things that they were really interested in, and they learned some cool things like soldering, it's pronounced soldering, yeah. So that was really fun. So we will be considering if we're going to continue that collaboration again next year. It was pretty cool. So again, they pre-signed up for these, and we really spent a lot of time on some very fun stuff. So just the numbers. So I kind of pulled from the last 4 years. Fiscal year 22 is the first year we started having the middle high school specific summer camps. Before, if there was a K-8 school, the summer camp was open to K-8. We had very small participation at the middle school level when we were doing that. It's really hard with 5 staff members to build programming enough to differentiate from incoming first graders through incoming 8th graders. So we spent the year restructuring, remodeling, coming up with a new system, and we transport the students from their elementary school to their summer camp. So we had a pretty good participation that year. We're also still coming off from like COVID at that point as well. So a lot of build back within our programming. And you see like it jumped about 100 students for fiscal year 23. We're kind of leveling off a little bit of a rise in fiscal year 25. Some of that, actually I think we were able to get a grant this summer to expand, to hire more staff at the Sheldon Elementary School, which we had an additional, I think, 20 students from that expansion grant. That's a large school, we had large size of staff, and we had a lot of students. And I think another thing that's really awesome with the Sheldon, historically, they never had any middle school participation, but when we created this blended middle school camp, we all of a sudden saw 37 middle schoolers join the Enosburg camp. And that Enosburg camp has sees on average about 110 students a day. It's bigger than their middle school. Next slide, please. So this is a comparison by site data. Bakersfield, you'll see in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, we did not have a LEAP summer camp at that site. Many of you will remember this. They have the licensed child care center that was serving that community for a while. We worked to receive grant funding to pilot having a LEAP summer camp at that school. It had been, I don't quite remember they had a LEAP summer camp for a little while, and then I think it had been about 8 years before we brought LEAPs back there. When some of these numbers I don't think my Enosburg Falls Middle High School camp size is correct for fiscal year 22. That's looking a little small. The rest are correct. But Enosburg and Richford have some numbers in there that include middle school students from the K-8 schools. So Berkshire, for example, add on, depending on the year, somewhere between 6 and 12 students, if you're looking just at the school. And I have those numbers on the next slide. So this is just looking at NMV. You can see the kind of building trajectory of summer enrollment. Again, fiscal year 22, building back. We've got some changes to summer camp, and we found, in that year, a lot of families were used to not having services and not coming back into communities, and then continuous work, we were seeing our numbers going back up. And
Heather, was that the year we were still having a mask through the summer? Anyone remember?
Is it? I don't.
Okay. I was just curious. 'Cause I
It
know
might have been the summer
after that.
after. I think we had just come off the school year, like the end of the school year. I think maybe they had. It's.
Okay.
I think with the amount that we focused on it, that we would have those years
No.
set in our
I think
brains.
it was 2021 that
Yeah, I
we
think
were
it
still
was.
masking.
Okay. Yeah. So this is June, July, right after that. So we had, a lot of families were used to like maintain space. Some of them were still not necessarily congregating. So there was definitely some build back. Yeah. And then these are the numbers for ER. Just put them up there just to get the whole breadth of the programming. I think we're good. And that was the last slide. Yeah. Okay. Let me just go back. Okay. So yeah, I just gave kind of the overview, kind of a large picture of what our programmings have. And in terms of staffing, also like fiscal year 22, I think we also had a very hard time finding staff. Again, our schools were short-staffed. Not many people were coming back into the workforce at that time. In terms of individual numbers at individual schools, there's different stories. Sometimes the numbers might be a little lower based on how many staff members we're able to hire. The elementary schools, we're looking for about 5 to 6 staff members, depending on the size of the school. And Sheldon, I think we had 10 staff members last summer, but they were seeing 85 students, very large program. And we've been doing some build back work in some of our other elementary schools. Is there more that we?
Thank you,
Something
Sarah.
that I missed, Lynn? Okay. Any questions about this summer programs?
I have a comment and question. I mean, bravo, it's really amazing. I know so much work goes into securing all the grant money and organizing this and our amazing staff. And these programs look so fun, and some of these adventures and outings and special guests. I know that, it's somewhat unique, this kind of scale and the breadth and depth of how we run these programs, that there are a lot of communities that do not do anything near this for all sorts of different factors. So it's a real blessing, and appreciate it so much. I have a question about enrollment on the slide 7 here. So it looks like in Berkshire and in Bakersfield, those are the two schools where I'm just specifically kind of looking at that FY24 that and then the FY25 numbers. So these are, do you have a sense of why the numbers are somewhat low given the population of the schools?
Yeah, so Bakersfield, what I've been hearing when I talk to the site coordinator and staff, I have heard that many families go to other camps. Often they're paid for camps, or their family members work at, like, say, Smugs, and so they get free enrollment into the Smugs camp. So I've heard that a population of students do that. We have not, when Leaps left Bakersfield about 10 years ago, we allowed those students to enroll in the Enosburg Elementary camp, and we found that that number was dwindling every year too. So we would see 1 or 2 elementary students only, so it wasn't very large. And so the wonder from the community was, if we built Leaps back at the school, would we be able to build up the numbers? So far, still a question, because it dropped from the year before. That's just the elementary students. I think last year we had 11 middle school students attend the Enosburg High School program. But in terms of a program at the school, it is a pretty small number.
Yeah.
So we definitely we have some investigating to do to see, like, is it our programming, is it our structuring, is it our advertising, is it the need within the community to have this program at the site. Berkshire, some of it was staff levels. We struggled, we lost a lot of Leap staff members from leaving when they left the school, and we spent some time, or it's taken some time to build back people to actually work in the school. We're very excited actually about the number 49 in fiscal year 25, because we had a significant shift of programming last year, and that's the Notch did not offer their summer camp, and we were wondering if we shifted their hours from noon to 5 down to 8 to 3, would that still work for the community? And it seems to. Richford Elementary also did not lose capacity participation when they made the same switch. So that was really exciting to see. We are still trying to build the capacity around having enough staff members at Berkshire over the summer, and still a little bit with a draw for some of the students to be in the program.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I want to ask a question. This is our K6 population, K5 population.
K5.
So I would say out of that, we're talking less than 100 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at probably close to 27-30% of our population is currently doing that. I would love to see that number higher, but that's, if I look comparatively, I think we're probably pretty close to everybody else. Although the number looks odd at 27, it probably isn't too far off from percentage-wise of other schools.
That's what I was gonna say too, is K5, all 4 NMV schools are about the same percentage of participation for the summer program. So when you look at the number of total students in that K5 programming in Bakersfield, Montgomery, Sheldon, and Berkshire, it's about 25 to 30%, so across all 4 schools.
I think we'd have to look at that because Montgomery is nearly
Oh,
the same
sorry,
size.
Montgomery's, yeah.
Yeah,
Montgomery's
huge. Montgomery's nearly the
Montgomery's
same
most
size
of
as
Sorry,
Bakersfield,
not
so it's a lot
the other three.
more. Yeah.
We're about the same number of kids as Bakersfield.
We definitely have room to grow.
Yeah,
And I would love to see that. I'm just saying, I think, and we're also year 2, it looks like, for Bakersfield. If I look comparatively along the way, it's just going to hopefully continue to grow. Right.
That is always a hope, and I think those numbers are very comparable to what the licensed childcare center has had for years prior. So we didn't really see an increase in participation at all when we switched to Leaps for the 7 hours of the day. And we had to downsize our staff too, because we had enough staff for up to 50 students, which I know would have been a large percentage, right, within your school. But that's what we were that was our aim, was to try to attract for that number of students. The LEAPS is sometimes a child care service for some families. I know I work all summer. I'm happy that my child has a spot in LEAPS when there's capacity for him. But then there's also some kids who say, I could be home or I could be at LEAPS and I'm choosing LEAPS. So we're also trying to make sure that our programs are designed in a way where students are choosing to come to LEAPS rather than maybe what the other alternative is that they have open to them.
And the grant, oh, sorry.
No, I was just about to ask, does Bakerfield and Berkshire offer this, same stuff that the rest of the, like mountain biking, hiking, and all those edifying?
Bakersfield does not have any bikes at this moment.
Okay.
And the elementary programs haven't been doing the biking or the hiking
Right.
programs. That's for
So
the
this is
older
just
sites.
K for 5.
Yeah.
These numbers.
Yeah. So the middle school students do have access to that at the other camps. In terms of programming, we have been doing a lot of work, like intentionally trying to increase capacity of the programming at some of the sites as well. And I don't have the list of the activities for Bakersfield. The one that I had as an example was a Berkshire example though. Yeah, but it's based on the same ideas and same collaboration. Last year I started having, was the second year where I started having an annual all LEAP staff retreat kickoff where I go over our goals, talk about board goals, and how LEAPS connects to all of those goals. And then we had some shared planning time. We're going to have that again this year with some facilitation by Vermont After School to continue on that progress.
I do know, I hear from some parents in Bakersfield that they do feel like it is kind of for kids that have parents at work all summer. And I think if we can get rid of that misconception and have kids that could choose to go there rather than stay home, I think that would be quite beneficial.
I agree. We definitely have some PR work around that
Yeah.
with families.
I think what's interesting with this data is that worry that we all had when the partnership with Notch went away. And, we had, at one point, we had a really large program here in Berkshire when we were connected to Notch, and it's been a few years. But I think we were really worried about, we were thinking through the lens of the childcare piece. We had always been able to offer something from 8 until 5 because they would do that 8 to 12 at the Notch and then 12:15 to 5 here. And we made the conscious decision when the Notch program went away to say, let's align this with the other programs, that 9 to 3, and wondered how that was going to work for families. And even with that shift, families found a way to make that work because we saw those numbers increase even with that shift in the timing. So I think that part was a happy surprise.
Absolutely.
That it's still working for kids and families.
And Heather, can you?
Have we asked these? Oh,
Go ahead, Kat.
I was just gonna say, have we asked these particular communities, sent out parent surveys or anything to see, what, would make it more feasible for families?
Yeah, surveying families is definitely something we love to do. We have it on our brochures, but then we only get the answers back from families really that are registering. So I have started drafting out a survey that I want to share with the team and make sure I'm asking the right questions and if there's other questions to ask. And my intention is I want to send it out to all the communities, but have people able to select which community they live in and which camp their youth participated in, so we can kind of get some feedback from both levels. We can just see across all of LEAPS how we're doing and who we're not serving.
And I just had one comment. My son is in 6th grade now, and while he didn't go to the Richford camp, a bunch of his friends did. And I heard from all of those parents how every kid loved it. And I was just saying to my son, see, you should have signed up, you should have gone. They just had, I just heard such good things about it. So I'm really, really impressed with the middle school stuff that I saw going on for those kids.
Awesome, thank you. I should try to get some students together to create like a little advertisement. So start blasting it when our brochures go out. Maybe that'll help because they hear it better from other kids. So
You do PSAs.
yeah,
I know somebody who's really good at that.
I have to talk to them.
So will you refresh my memory about the grant? Is this the same grant that at an SU meeting you came last spring and we were able to, you were able to kind of lock it in for a certain number of years?
The 21C grant last winter, that's the one for 5 years.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
and then we had a separate grant to fund the Bakersfield LEAP site. So it wasn't
Okay.
coming out of the SU budget at all. It was 100% grant funded.
Yeah,
With, I think, possibly we had a little bit of extra money put in there. So that's something in terms of thinking fiscal year 26. I'm always looking for more grants. I know that there will be another grant round, the same one that funded the Sheldon grant or Sheldon expansion. That will be coming up at some point. I don't know the dates for that. Expanding summer programming is part of what the grants are for, so I will be looking into that.
great.
But is it, so that grant runs out? The one for Bakersfield runs out
Yes,
when?
yep, so we used the last of that one.
Okay, so then you're kind of at a decision point about funding for Bakersfield because they don't fall under the 21C umbrella for the others for summer.
Correct. Yes, so we don't have 21C funds allocated for Bakersfield summer camp.
And we won't for the next 4 years or 5 years?
4 years after this.
4 years after this one, it just passed.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons for looking at the data because they didn't have a camp when we originally got approved. And then we added the camp because we got the extra grant, which has gone away. So as we're building the budget, Heather's gonna come back and have this conversation with you as board members about what's our funding plan in terms of that Bakersfield program. And there is also that added layer in Bakersfield, and you missed all of this last year, but, well, you know it from way back, you missed the conversation last year. So we had conversations around the ASP, so the childcare portion in Bakersfield, and we had conversations about that's a unique program that's running for Bakersfield that was started a couple decades ago to fill a need in the community at that time. And I think where we left it last year was that there would be some surveys done within the community to see, is this still a need, or are we running a program because there was a need when we started it 20 years ago? So we definitely left, this is my recollection, and please push back on me if you have a different one, that we wanted to make sure that if that program was going to continue, that we weren't contributing tax dollars to that program.
Right.
That it was self-sustaining, and that, you know, I think we're the fiscal agent of that program. But are we at a place where we want Kevin and his team to be digging into that data and bringing information back, because we're quickly going into budget in the next couple of months? So I'm guessing with Kevin to do the anecdotal data, Morgan to do the work with, I don't know if it's still Sharon, but to do the cost analysis to see, like, is that still a self-sustaining program? And if it's not a self-sustaining program, I think when you have those budget conversations about both leaves and that, I think you're gonna need to make a decision about both and either, or what direction are you gonna go in with that?
We'll probably need some information for our perspective for approving the budget on the LEAPS program specifically, similar to the ASP or the childcare rather, that shows how much it costs to have staff and how many students, and then we really will have to weigh whether it's worth the cost, cause like what's the minimum number of staff that you can have and still run a program? And, I don't know how that's gonna translate, because this program's really only in the second year in this iteration. So it is still being built, but we're gonna have to make a decision. Do we wanna fully fund that, or do we wanna fund part of it and hope Heather gets a grant for another part of it, or hope Heather can get a grant for the whole thing? But we'll have to know that by January.
Yeah, one of the things that we had a conversation about is, there wasn't time this time, but we were digging in when we were having the conversation prepping for this, was that it would be great if we could look at this and say, look at the staffing costs like you were saying. That's enrollment, total number of students that enrolled, but it's not participation.
Not daily, average daily.
Okay,
So
it's
looking
not.
at maybe average daily and
Okay.
the total staffing costs and trying to get it per pupil, average daily, to figure out, like, when we look at each of these programs, how much is it costing us for each of those programs, so that, might that be a next step that the board is interested in?
Yes, definitely. And I did misread that because I'm thinking enrollment, but I wasn't thinking participation. So that leads me to another option would be to either shorten the number of weeks that the program runs in Bakersfield if we're finding that it's too costly per student based on average daily membership or participation, or do we only run it certain days of the week? So those are things that in your survey would be really great to find out if, parents answer the survey, well, my kid only went Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because they had swim lessons and all these other things going on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that would be interesting information to find out also.
With the 21C aspect, I know it wasn't 21C funded specifically for that
Right.
site, but it is in our scope of work. We are required to have 5 weeks minimum of
Okay.
programming, and they're looking for full weeks. So that's kind of locked in with being part of the LEAPS, being under the LEAPS umbrella.
But since they don't fund it, and we were funding it, or we would be funding it if there were no other grants, is there a reason why we would have to follow the same if it's not
I can ask the
financially
state
viable?
about that. I know that, like, in terms of, it would be, cause I would have to talk to the state coordinator, and it would be a change of scope for our programming, and there's a couple of processes for
Even though
developing
it's
that.
not
Because it's built,
funded by 21C?
yeah,
she
21C is
Part
federal.
of it is,
federal.
like, she's also funded through it, and she's running that program is a piece of it. I think
yeah,
we
it's
would have
because
to
it's
talk to
still
them all.
LEAPS, because not all of what we do is 21C funded with LEAPS, because we have,
The matching money.
we have the matching money, so certain parts of our programs, but every part of our program has to follow the 21C rules to be considered part of our program.
Okay. So,
I get where you're going with that, though.
yeah,
is,
I mean, it has to be financially viable
right.
Yeah.
if we're gonna allocate our budget for it. But if there's a way that you can make it work and still be approved by the LEAPS people, so we'll just need to get as much info as possible, I
Yeah.
guess, for Morgan to put a number in there.
I'm meeting with the state director in 2 weeks. It's already a scheduled meeting, so I can put that out there.
And the grant that you were able to secure that's now expired, is there another iteration of that same
That
grant?
was ARPA money, but there is
Wow.
a new, the state has, I don't remember exactly what they're calling it, but an after school for all grant that operates similar to what 21C, but it's a different pot of money. That is every year. They've only done it once, so I'm hoping they change the timeline, because it was really stressful, because we did not get the application until spring, and we didn't find out until maybe June if we received the money. So we were on edge for a while, debate with
Yeah.
families with our wait list, wondering if we were gonna hire more staff or not. So hopefully they adjust that timeline,
Right.
but it hasn't been released yet, so.
And when, in the past, before there was a site at Bakersfield, those kids could go up to Enosburg, correct?
Yes.
And we provided busing or
Yes.
no?
We
did.
provided the bus transportation.
Okay,
And they had the ASP program, the subsidy-driven parent pay portion of the program that remained. So they're kind of competing, and I think this has been the tension in Bakersfield. There was a near, catastrophe over swimming lesson schedules this summer in Bakersfield because she had to offer the full 5 weeks, and had those swimming lessons landed where they did, it would have pulled most of those kids out to swimming lessons, so we would have had staffing but no kids. So having those two programs it's an additional complication, and I just think as a board you need to continue to be mindful of where the dollars are going and be mindful about like why are we doing certain things in one community and not in other communities. And let me be clear, I'm not asking you to add that extra piece anywhere else. I think we're in an okay spot, so just want to be clear about that part. You have something that you wanted to add?
No, we talked about it this summer, and I talked about it, this is right on. They do have there's a competing piece to it.
Yeah.
There's that traditionalist, I like the after-school program that runs it, it really supports my family and my work. And LEAPS does the same thing, but there's just this, it's different, it's difficult. And somehow we gotta get them to either merge together as to one or figure out what we're gonna do. Because it does compete.
And that was totally random that I said swimming lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I had no idea that there was a competitive thing going on. Sorry.
You wouldn't have thought that. Yeah.
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 That's good.
so it seems as though we would want that data and those surveys and those numbers brought to us for October, November at the latest, as we head into budget, like really building the budget.
Yeah, I have some of the numbers really accessible, some of the other ones I can unpack a little.
Maybe you and I can get together and think about how that looks.
Yeah,
I think be really thoughtful about the survey so we can
Yeah,
really get at
very
like what's the question that we want
What do you
answered.
really want to know?
Yeah.
Because I think our goal is always that we want the same opportunities for all the schools.
Mhm.
We don't want anybody to have to do something different, but just gotta find out if the numbers work.
Right. So what you have now with the ASP is they have that is childcare.
It's paid child
So they have childcare on all the snow days. They have childcare on
breaks.
the extra weeks, the breaks, all those things that all. Although that's the part where you just gotta check, like that's still running through the school. And that isn't something that you're offering families anywhere else, like
Right.
there's still childcare problems, and I am not convinced that the childcare problems are that different in Bakersfield than they are anywhere else. I would love to see the data that shows that.
I'm not going on record.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to. But I would like to see.
That is really
where that
interesting
is,
that you mentioned that, because I'm wondering what's different about Bakersfield than Montgomery or Richford.
right,
It's traditional.
okay. All right, so to be continued.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. And I do want to just thank Heather publicly for the work that she's done with this program, because it definitely serves as a model for other programs, and I think we were the only system in the state that got, what is it called? I always forget.
It's just a continuation.
So they only
renewal-
offered it to the
renewability.
one system, and it was ours because of quality of the program. So
Bravo,
kudos to you
Heather.
and the staff, Heather.
That's excellent,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
So I was just going to say about the 24-25 opening, I think that there was a lot of work that went into preparing for this school year, and I think that that's something that, I know as a principal, I used to get asked, when do you go back to school? And I would chuckle like, oof, work all summer when you're a principal, because you have to get, Gavin's report is a perfect example of the amount of time that went into that. There was a lot of work that happened at all levels this summer, and I think we got off to a pretty good start with our convocation day, our in-service. We kicked off a much more personalized, professional, needs-based, professional learning plan, and teachers and staff really got to make decisions based on where they are, where their learning edge is. Personally, we had some strong feedback about that. Did some, our SEL program, Wayfinder, Social Emotional Learning Program. I'm going to try to work on the acronyms there. We had professional learning that was pushed into all the schools, and our principals were incredibly flexible because there was a lot of moving parts this year. And I read some of the feedback about those trainings, and the training feedbacks were really, really excellent. And it sounds like teachers from all levels, K through 12, had, I think from that feedback that I read, it seems like more enthusiasm for a new program or initiative than I've really ever seen. So I'm excited to see where that's going to go. We also had a pretty strong kickoff for our literacy programs in K5 and 6-8. I know our administrators got to do some of that this summer, and they have certainly worked hard with their own professional learning and getting ready to open. So from my perspective, it was a really, really great start to the year. When we go to principals, I would love to have principals share a little bit about, how does the start feel from your vantage point in your schools. I've started my school visits this week. Neither of my school visits were in this district, but I've been to 2 in the ER district, and I've had a lot of fun seeing kids and teachers back in buildings. So we'll hear more when we get to all of you. I wanted to give the board a PCB update. So I can't tell you that acronym because I can't say that word. Polychlorobiphenols. So we have a mandate in the state of Vermont to test buildings that were built before a certain year. And in this Northern Mountain Valley district, 2 of our buildings have tested positive for PCBs. So the trouble area is over there. Berkshire has 2 classrooms that we haven't been able to use for more than a year because they have elevated levels of PCB. So we're going to have Morgan jump in on this, but we have completed the additional testing at Berkshire, and unless something happened last week, we're still awaiting the results of those, and that's really that next level of testing that we just did was to see how deep the PCBs have leached into those materials, is essentially what that next level of testing is. So once those results come back, then we'll be able to work with the consultants to build a remediation plan. In Sheldon, we have a problem with funding at the state level. There's no funding left. So in order for them to continue the PCB program and do as was written in the bill in terms of how we're going to pay for this, things are kind of paused right now. That further testing and work in Sheldon isn't going to proceed yet, and I'll just tell you, in Sheldon's case, they're still able to use their spaces. It's the gym and really the envelope around that entire gym, and it's low enough where it doesn't impact anyone not being able to be in those spaces. It's really like locker rooms and custodial, what's that? Boiler room. So we wouldn't be able to put preschoolers in those like locker rooms or boiler room, which we wouldn't anyway. So we have that piece going for us, but we have a positive PCB test in Sheldon, and right now no money to move forward. So what we know is every time schools are tested, I think we were talking the other day about, some of these testing. I mean, in a school the size of ours is over $20,000 every time they're tested, and now that those funds are run out, we are going to have to contend with the testing piece, and then hope that there is additional money in the legislature that is allocated in order to be able to really get to the remediation piece, because we now find ourselves in this situation where we have positive PCB test results in our schools, and even though Vermont's levels, please correct me if you understand this differently, even though Vermont's levels are 3 times more stringent than the federal government, it's still triggered kind of a stopwatch from the federal EPA. We have to do something now that it's been identified. And I believe from the first meeting that we had, I think is it 4 years? It's somewhere in that range. We have several years, but we need to be able to remediate before then there are sanctions from the federal EPA. So we're really at a place where we really need to rely on the legislature to come up with a solid plan for how to fund all of these schools that have now been identified as having PCBs, because if that doesn't happen, if there isn't funding that's found, we will eventually have to mitigate, and we'll have to figure out as a community, are we going to have to make decisions about bonding and take even more money out of the ed fund to remediate our schools. So it's not really positive news, but that is our reality right now, is still moving forward in Berkshire, paused in Sheldon. And just for your knowledge, we got lucky in Montgomery and Bakersfield because those schools were built later and they didn't have to be tested. So, any questions on the PCB piece?
Do you foresee at the legislative level that they might tie in money to deal with the PCBs with some of the talk about re-engaging construction aid for school, or I don't know, there being construction aid available again from the state level?
I really don't. I mean, I have hopes that some of those things will happen. I don't know that construction aid necessarily be tied to PCB because they're in my mind they're two separate things.
Okay.
It's dealing with this testing program and it's dealing with the long-term problem we have with, we have issues in schools that haven't been attended to for a lot of years. So we have deferred maintenance that, has to be addressed for some of our schools to be able to continue to operate. Do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so. I'd say that we're still slightly optimistic that we'll get good news from the latest round of sampling here. We think that we've identified the sources of the contamination, and the sampling is basically just showing us how deep into the walls we need to dig to do the remediation. Unfortunately, that's there to wait until those results come back before we can start swinging a hammer. But it is a relatively well-defined space, and so certainly in a much better position than our friends at North Berkshire are.
Yes, for sure.
And the clock ticking that you said based on kind of this federal EPA, now that the horses left the barn here, does that mean that we are going to have to contend with this and whatever costs for Sheldon and Berkshire exist in this coming budget that we're working on building?
No, I think that the clock drags out a little longer than that, and we'll try to get clearer information on how long of a runway we have for that. But my point in telling you that is, once you have a positive PCB test, even if there's no state money that comes along, we have to contend with that ticking clock at the federal level. So we'll eventually, as a community, if the state doesn't come through with funding, we're going to have to contend with this at our community level.
Right.
And I think that this would be the exact wrong time for us to try to go to our communities and say we need more money, and ultimately it's going to have an impact on the ed fund, because if there's no more funding at the legislative level, all of these schools that have the positive tests are all going to have to figure out how to contend with it, which will have a huge draw on the ed fund overall, if that's how it gets addressed.
Actually, I think that's the way it should be addressed, Lynn. It should not be addressed on a community by community basis. We should not be solely responsible for the remediation costs in this district without a lot of guidance from the AOE on how individual school districts are gonna go about this. And yes, it probably will be somehow tied to the ed fund, because that's how all education monies are allocated. But for us to panic now and think that we have to set aside millions of dollars for PCB remediation,
Yeah,
I
that
wouldn't go
definitely wasn't
down,
my
I wouldn't go
message.
down
No.
that road right now. There is so much left that needs to be talked about, because like you said, our levels, our benchmark is 3 times stricter, more stringent than the federal level. So right there, we have the strictest levels in the United States. So there's something to be said about that too. Like, are they too strict? Who's to say?
Where did they come from? Lisa, do you know where they came from?
Yeah,
'Cause
the
that's what keeps
the
coming up for
legislature
me.
the legislature made up a number, Kat, basically, and said this is what we want it to be, and it was based on some scientific research of other things, other chemicals, and I don't know how they landed exactly on this number, but it was in a bill that got
Because I feel like,
passed.
I'm so sorry. I just feel like now that they're in this pickle, like that's what keeps coming up is the narrative that, well, it's so stringent in Vermont, our testing standards versus the rest of the country, like, is that a way for the AOE to like backpedal out of this now
No, I
and
don't.
say nobody has to actually do anything?
I don't think it's the
we were going
AOE.
by these different standards.
Yeah, it's not the Agency of Education that's backpedaling, really. It's like everyone collectively is just saying, oh, okay, now that we have these really stringent levels, we have to really make sure why they're that stringent, and someone has to delve into that to make sure that that really is the right number. And honestly, I don't personally understand how we could have passed a bill. I mean, I know how it happened, but how you can pass a bill making something 3 times as stringent as anybody else in the United States or the federal level. Like, why we didn't tie it to the federal level is beyond me, but that's what we're dealing with. Everything that comes out of the legislature is usually hyperbole. It's usually got to be the first and the best and the hardest and the highest, because Vermont's got to be ahead of everybody else. And that's all well and good if you've got the money to back it up. But we don't, because the PCB fund is gone. Basically, Burlington sucked it up and it's gone. So we need to figure out another way to fund it. And that could come in terms of higher taxes, because of if it's going to come out of the ed fund, what funds the ed fund is taxes. So there's going to have to be some discussion, and I'm glad Mary brought up the school aid for construction, because it's possible that those conversations would happen in that committee that's talking about opening up school aid for construction again, but it's just one, PCBs is just one little piece of school construction. Lynn mentioned all the deferred maintenance across the state. There are aging buildings that need things like boilers and roofs and things that communities can't always fund. So should there be aid for construction? And should PCB remediation be part of that? It's all big conversations that need to happen. So I think you're seeing the frustration of it, you're hearing the frustration of it, Kat. And when you're like in the moment and people are asking you, well, how can this be? And you say, I don't really know how it can be. That really is the way it is right now. No one really knows what's gonna happen. We're just very fortunate that we're not North Country or the other schools that have been identified that are so high that students cannot be in the building.
Yeah. Well said, Lisa. I appreciate like hearing it from your vantage point, and you know, we're not in a great place with this, and I think we definitely am not trying to say we need to be budgeting for money to contend with the PCBs, but we also have to go into this with a deep understanding that this, if we're gonna advocate for something, we really need to advocate that there's money that is allocated towards PCB remediation, because we find ourselves in this board with half of our schools who have issues, and we need there to be money to remediate these, so. Yeah. Anything else, Wanda?
Thank you, that's a great, great, thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa, for those insights too, really
You're
helpful. Okay, so we're up with our principal reports, and Kevin, anything you'd like to highlight or add to your board report?
We have a board report. I just want to talk about the first week prior to, and then the in-service week, and then the first couple of weeks of school have been fantastic. The teachers have really, they're excelling. They are really talking, a little bit of what Gavin was talking about earlier, I think is going across all of our schools. And it's just been amazing to watch the teachers over this past few weeks. I had the opportunity in the springtime to go up there quite a bit and make some observations. And I came in pretty hot and ready, and they have responded beautifully, and it's going really well. So, 1 minute, I did it, just for you. I can start here, just take it a minute. I got it in a minute.
Thank you,
Can I just ask
That's a
how,
different-
Please.
how is the student perception this year? Like, how are
Well,
things going there?
Gavin had 38, we had 37. We will always be one less playing room than Gavin's.
Okay.
No.
That was last year.
Oh, good.
We're at 14.
Oh.
I would say
Man.
we've had none this year. No, Lynn, great question. It is a completely different school.
I can't wait to visit.
Completely different school.
Great.
Yeah, kids are engaged, books are in people's hands. It's really awesome. Pretty proud to be part of that and watch them as educators growing, and it's really a lot of fun.
Thank you for your work on that.
Yep, it's good.
Great, thank you.
So just touching base, I covered a lot of my board notes today in this school spotlight. One thing I did want to bring up, you'll notice under other, I do have wonderful news. Mika Menalestis, our middle school science teacher in the Philippines, did finally today get her sticker from the Philippine government, which will allow her to travel to the United States. She will be flying in this Friday at 9:42 into Burlington. If anyone can give her a lift. No, I'll be meeting her at the airport. Also, the organization we've worked through to bring in an international candidate, it's called CCUSA. They originally started as a Camp Counselors USA, but they've branched into education. I've had a very positive experience working with this organization. We actually ended up making this hire in late July, so to bring her in after the first 2 weeks of school is actually truly remarkable, and I think it's been a lot of help through the agency as well, guiding this process. They do have a couple of things that, in order to be a host school, they have a couple of things that they ask of us. One is going to be a virtual visit, which I will be, I'm working with Ruth Callahan to coordinate. And then there will also be some cultural events that they would like us to hold as well, as a chance for our teacher to showcase her culture to the students as well. So we've already discussed about perhaps widening that, and we've noticed that things get kind of depressing in February.
Yeah.
It's after the holiday season. Nobody gets excited about Valentine's Day anymore. And so, actually, I'm married. But anyhow, it's one of those things where we've noticed that at times it's high stress, and there's kind of like, it sort of feels like it's in the middle of the year, and it's one of the darkest, coldest months. So we're going to try to see if we can maybe roll over some of the cultural event that we'd be doing with Mika anyway to widen it to the entire school. We're still sort of in preliminary discussions, but that's a direction we're thinking about moving towards.
It's always a toss-up for me of February or March, which is worse.
Oh, February, by far.
You've done if you live on your road.
That's true,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's lovely, and that's a really exciting that the bureaucracy is flowing for her to make her way here. It's great, thanks, Gavin. Sandy?
Well, I feel fantastic about our opening. I think it's been extremely smooth. There's been a lot of positivity. People seem happy. Kids are doing well, transitioning back in, so it's been really nice. I was gonna say a little bit about in-service as well, because it was really different this year, planning in-service. We had a lot of days, and then a lot of things that we had to, it was like a puzzle, because we had so many different trainings that had to be on such and such a date. So between the literacy, the SEL, Bridges Math has a 3rd edition, so there were trainings for that. And I had something else. We had the de-escalation with Tim Stanley that was outstanding. And the other piece was too that we had to give the paras more days this year, so the paras were essentially with us the whole time. And I found that to be very powerful, because they were with our staff for everything, and a lot of great conversations, and we delved in a lot regarding our culture, and we do that a lot each year, because no matter how many new staff members we have, we feel like the importance of being on the same page and all understanding the expectations, and all, students are all our students. It's not you're the 3rd grade teacher and they're yours. It's all one. So I felt it was more powerful than ever this year. Good stuff. I don't know, do I need to talk about my foot and I have a school
That's
spotlight?
up to you.
Well, I have to have surgery on my foot. I know, and they told me I have to be out for 4 weeks. So that kind of flipped me out a little bit, but I don't really have a choice. And my school spotlight's next month.
We'll adjust.
Okay.
We'll have to, we might flip the location for next month.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
I would rather. I don't like to miss my school
We can
spotlight.
certainly work with that.
Okay, great.
One of your colleagues will be happy to switch with you.
Kevin just said that's it.
Oh, I was saying.
I don't wanna go to Montgomery. A long ways.
Well, you're gonna go in November. Or I guess you can zoom it.
Well, we'll figure that out.
Okay, great.
Oh, I
So-
hope that goes really well for you,
I do
Sandy.
too.
I'm so sorry.
Because, I don't stop moving very
I
often.
know.
And
I know.
being out of commission for that long and having a boot and doing chores and things like that. But luckily I have a retired sister who's coming up to stay
Oh,
with me for
good.
6 weeks.
Good.
So
Well, we'll
we
be
don't
thinking,
kill each other.
we'll be
Wonderful.
thinking about you, Sandy.
Thank
Well,
you.
we talked today about a coverage plan, to see if we can get some support in Montgomery while Sandy is away. So I'm working on that.
I'm 3 miles down the road.
On leave.
Yeah. On leave, it's gonna be really hard.
Okay. All right, Jerry Sue, anything you'd like to highlight or add to your board report?
Yes.
Okay.
Other than, it's been, in service was awesome, it was a puzzle, there was a lot going on and lots of moving pieces. But I was thinking this week about what the highlight I wanted to share was, and one of my staff members brought up, when I was interviewed for this position a year and a half ago, one of the questions asked is, we have a lot of open positions, how are you gonna fill them? And so last year, we did indeed still have like 6 or 7 pair openings and a teaching opening throughout the entire year that never got filled. Well, starting year 2, we only have our health position that we now have a lead on for next year. So and we didn't actually anticipate, we were pessimistic about filling that one, so everyone was joking that we're 100% filled to start the year. And our new staff are doing phenomenally.
Great.
Like they are such wins for Sheldon, so we were very excited, and there's a lot of positivity around that. But really, they were impressed because I had said it'll take me several years to get us fully staffed, and we're starting year 2,
Bravo.
essentially fully
Yeah.
staffed. So yes, but it's wonderful. So that's one very exciting thing to finally. Well, we're fully staffed in sharing spaces like crazy at the moment, but it's working great. Everyone's really chipping in for that, being flexible. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so, for board business, our next meeting will be October 2nd. it was supposed to be at Montgomery, but it sounds like we may shift that location, let someone else do the spotlight, and then hopefully Sandy will be ready maybe for November.
I will be ready for November.
Sandy will be ready for November, so that'll be, just keep an eye out on your email for whatever shift is gonna take place for that October meeting as far as the location goes. Anything from board folks, that agenda items or anything else that feels pressing in the moment? No? Okay, great. Well, we'll look forward to seeing everyone on October 2nd. I'll make a motion to adjourn. We'll do that by just ayes. And Pat, you good? Everyone good with
Aye.
adjournment? All right, thank you all. Drive
Thanks,
safely
everyone.
home.
Thank you.
Good luck.